Welcome to the Save Our Sperrins campaign, Voices from the Frontline. I'm Morella Fife, your host and a member of the Save Our Sperrins team. At the heart of this struggle are the voices of local people, farmers, families and young campaigners whose homes, work and families are rooted in this place. Their voices are joined by supporters from across the world, standing in solidarity, from professors to artists, from those offering vast expertise to those whose presence alone is an act of support. All have stood with us. In this series, we share stories of resistance, resilience, and hopes from those determined to protect these mountains, their land, their rivers, the very air they breathe, and their community. Let's get started. My guest today is Sinéad Mhearnóg from ConyGlen near Greencastle. Sinéad is a young mother and a passionate advocate for the Irish language and culture. She works with Glór nGael, supporting communities across Ireland to keep language alive. She has been a familiar voice at Save Our Sperrins events over the years. In 2018, Sinéad travelled to Toronto for the PDAC mining conference, where she stood up and spoke truth to power, telling shareholders and officials exactly how her community feels about the proposed gold mine. Her courage and that of her fellow earth protectors sent ripples far beyond Greencastle. In this conversation, we talk about her roots in the Sperrins, the role of language in shaping identity, the resilience of community, and her hopes and fears for the future. Here is my conversation with Sinéad Mhearnóg. Sinéad, you're very welcome to the Save Our Sperrins podcast. And thanks for joining me on your lunch break today. It was really great to have you here. And I'm sorry it's taken us this long to connect up, but here we are.
No bother. It's Ghéibheannaigh, Morella. Asking Corey for the invitation.
I'd love to begin by getting a sense of who you are, your roots, and what has shaped your love of language and culture. Who are you and where are you?
Who am I? You'd think that's an easy question, who am I? But even in terms of a name, for me, I feel like that's such an important thing because, I see myself as Sinéad Mhearnóg, and that's like a big part of my identity. But I wasn't, christened Sinéad Mhearnóg, I was christened Sinead Warnock. But I've had Sinéad Mhearnóg as my name from I was 15. I changed my passport to Sinéad Mhearnóg once I fell in love with Irish, and my whole entire identity has been taken over by the language, but I feel like actually the language gave me a key to finding my real identity. Like I grew up in the townland of Mhearnóg, so just at Mhearnóg Hill, and opposite the glen of ConyGlen. Most people know us as ConyGlen, but it's actually Mhearnóg. And those wee things, those wee subtle differences are important because local people understand all those wee things, and the slight difference of where you are affects who you are and what you did growing up. And we grew up with, like, we'd no neighbours. We live, people may say, the backside of Greencastle, but I loved it. We'd no neighbours, but there was a lot of old neighbours that lived up the glen, and they were old men that lived on their own. They lived without electricity, they lived without running water. I would have been very young, but I remember at times going with my daddy to visit them, or maybe with my granny as well. And my daddy maybe carrying in water for them and stuff. But I vividly remember them and the conversations, and they would have had engines to bring electricity for them. So all those wee things affected my view of life. I suppose to me that was all normal growing up, and I grew up in a house with my I'm the oldest of 6, but my granny lived with us, and I had my mummy and daddy in the house, and my daddy loves to use like the old names, you would say, like the nicknames of families, and he would talk of townlands as opposed to the road, or as opposed to what you would see, or like, I said, who's that person, he'd be Mickey Johnny Paddy from whatever, and he mentioned Thailand, I would be like, who? And he'd be like, oh, and he's connected to this, and he always used those nicknames. It used to drive me insane when I was younger, but now I appreciate what he was doing because it was nearly like a glimpse into like a different life, and my granny, they lived with us, and then she was like of that old variety, she baked her own bread. She used to take us about, and we'd have got gooseberries, we'd have walked, and we'd have found a rhubarb. I remember going for rhubarb with her when the nuts come out, and it was very aware I think, well, I'm aware now. I don't think I was aware at the time of all those changing seasons and the different things that happened. They just happened, but that was my normality. Like she would have taken us walking around the fields and all. I remember walking up like sheep trails. Well, and I think now, like she must have been fairly old, but like we did all those things, and it was just, to me, it was just normal. But I realized as I went on to like primary school, secondary school, that actually, that even to my friends in primary school probably that lived even in Maryville and Greencastle, or that lived in another part of Greencastle, that they didn't necessarily get that same insight into the past. And maybe I'm just more aware of it now because I am so interested in the language. But yeah, it all affected me just in bringing me to, I suppose, who I am now.
So who or what first inspired your love and interest in the Irish language? Like, was there a catalyst moment? Were you brought up with Gaelic in the family? Or did the language come later? Or
Well, we didn't speak Irish at home per se. It's not like anybody spoke Irish as a living language, but it was always sprinkled through everything. So we always would have talked about your brogue, your gansey, like even things like the Sally rod. Like Sally is the word for willow, and that's where, because obviously that is what it's made of. Even recently, there's a word when you drive down our road, there's a thing called the S. That's the word for waterfall. All these things that they were just words to me, and they were just things I said, and there was like people around us would have come, and there was a man, it's come John Neil Ban. I just thought that was his name, but now I learned it's his nickname, and it's actually Neil Ban, which is, the white-haired Nile, but
all right.
all those things were normal. So there was Irish there, but I never knew it was Irish, kind of. It was just the things we used, and as I already said, the townland names and the like nicknames we would use. But then I went to, I suppose in primary school, we had a few teachers that would have taught us, Railor and Pan Louis and all those things. But then when I went to Loretto, and I had a great teacher who's now the principal in Loretto, Siúan Cullen, she's actually from Ballinascreen, and really, like, she spent her classes speaking in Irish to us as much as speaking in English to us. She really used it as, like, not like, I know some teachers maybe teach through English and then teach the Irish, where she spoke a lot of Irish, so it became normal to us. Like, there was phrases I learned then that I always knew, but I never knew how to spell them because I just learned them from ear.
Yeah.
And then I went to Mhearnóg, College to Mhearnóg in Donegal, and like from then on, that was it. Like, absolutely fell in love with it. It became a living, breathing language with the Bannantees, with all the people up there. And at that point, I think I realized of how much connection to the language I previously had, because I remember my granny saying to me, she gave me a note of a man who lived up there. You should meet this man when you're up there. Now, I never did, because obviously I was probably 12 or 13. I wasn't gonna, sort of at that now. I wish I had now, but there was things that she was said, you'll know this person, or we went visiting houses and they would have been Irish speakers, but I had never made the connection, and it wasn't until I got older. So it was then that I fell in love with Irish. I did A-level Irish, I did Spanish, Irish, and geography, and then I went to university in Galway. And it wasn't until I went to university in Galway, which is a real bugbear of mine, that I found out of how much heritage and historic, like linguistic importance there was in Greencastle. And it wasn't until I had a lecture, McCongle, and Nolig McCongle, and I'd do some sort of a report or something, and he was like, well, why don't you do it in the Irish school? It was in Greencastle, the summer school. And I was, what summer school? And he said, do you not know about your own? Geez, Sinead, who are you? What? You don't even know where you're from. And I give me some documents, and it like opened up like an amazing box of things that I had never knew. And I was nearly embarrassed that I had come from Greencastle and didn't know any of it. Like,
well,
amazing.
That's a fascinating story. It's really interesting. You talked there about the living, breathing language, where I have 12 years of Irish being taught to me, but it never came alive for me. So I came out with probably -D in my leaving cert and an A in my French honours, and it wasn't cool. It was absolutely not cool for us to learn Irish. I was in a school in Dublin, and like, of all the grammar constructs, probably most of the vocabulary there, but it's all lost. And I'm sure it will come back to me if I said to. That's in my next life. I do plan to do something about that, but I'd need to photocopy myself or something to make that happen. But yeah, I am mildly envious of you that you have such a command of the language, and fair play to you. It's a great thing. Um, So you studied language planning. In your view, how does language influence who we are and how we see ourselves?
Yeah, so when I finished university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to do something with Irish and something, I suppose, practical. People always just say, "Oh, you're doing Irish, you're going to be a teacher," and I am not cut out to be a teacher. And like I have lots of respect for all the teachers out there who do sit down and do that with kids, but it was just never for me. I think because I had learned about what had happened in Greencastle and how the language had survived for so long, and then all of a sudden there was this language shift, and like I wanted to understand that more, and I wanted to understand what I could do really to I suppose to do my bit, not to undo it, I can't undo it, but to do something, you know, in respect of those people, to celebrate those people. So I chose to do a master's in language planning, and it really looks at, I suppose, the sociolinguistics elements. And so basically no language exists without a community, you know, and a community has to go through so many things to have that language, and all communities are different. And I came across a lot, I suppose there's a lot of like academia stuff out there about different languages and what they've gone through, but there's some really good bits out there. And one of the things that really stuck with me was this Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I hope I'm not pronouncing that really badly. He's a Kenyan writer, and he said, if you know all the languages of the world but don't know your mother tongue, that is enslavement. So it was the first time I really came across, I suppose, that idea of, obviously I understood colonialism, but I'd never thought about it really much in terms of my own self, because I didn't grow up in a house that really was very like green or orange, you know. It was like we just were who we were, and it was never talked about. And I grew up in a house where we'd loads of people calling on their Cayley, because where we live there is loads of both sides of the community. And I have some you know, we've some Church of Ireland, I suppose, in our history and stuff, and that was a big thing with our granny living there, always people there. So I'd never looked at it through that prism. But then we were studying about languages around the world and their effects and what colonialism did, and then I really realized, you know, what happened in Greencastle, I suppose. It disenfranchised the people, and that really opened my eyes to that. And that was at that time I decided that I wanted to do something, I suppose, to give back to those people who had been disenfranchised. And I decided to set up well, there was a commemoration around the time. There had been a school Souri, like a summer school in Greencastle in 1911, which was a massive thing in terms of the revitalization of the language and the Athbheochán at the time, which was going on, you know, with the GA, with Conradh na Gaeilge movement. And that happened in 1911 in Greencastle. So that was around the time I was doing the master's as well. And then we decided we were going to do a summer school to commemorate. So actually it was Fidelma's, I think, is it her uncle or great uncle, Sean O'Carlin, was one of the last native speakers in Glenelly. And he had said, it won't be through me or the likes of me that the language will survive, it'll be through the young people. So we decided then to set up a summer school for young people, an Irish language summer camp, so that people, so that in my head, that nobody would ever leave Greencastle again that had no idea like I did. They wouldn't have to go to Galway to find out about their own heritage and their own history. And we set that up, and like, I don't know, it just opened my eyes to how much of our heritage and culture has been taken from us. Like even our names, like I said about myself, like I use Mhearnóg, and I had decided from a very early age that I was going to stick with Mhearnóg and not Mhearnóg. And even when I got married, it was a big challenge, and I kept Mhearnóg and I added the Irish version of my husband's name because I just couldn't. For me anyway, I work very much from the heart and how I feel and how my soul feels, and it was an important thing for me. But like our own names, you know, when you look, what language planning looks at is how things can be targeted, and you look at the history here in Ireland, like with, I suppose, when the English came and they were taking over, or they were trying to bring their English norms, and there was the Statute of Kilkenny in the 1530s where they wanted to change us over to English order and language and habit, basically changing our way of life. And one of the main things they did was to avoid using Irish and making you use the English version of your name. So even you look around our area, you know, like there's McCullough's, but Mac Cú Olu is son of the Hound of Ulster. You know, like there's something so much more strong when you understand what's under there, or the townland names and all those things. So I did language planning, and it's brought me, I suppose, to my job, and I love everything about it. But it helped me see actually a lot more about where we come from and what we've been, I suppose, been taken off us.
Okay. When you speak about when a people when the language is removed from a people, they also their identity is also lost straight away. And I was reading recently about the native indigenous people of Turtle Island. I don't know if you're, and Turtle Island, to anyone who's not aware, is what the native Indian indigenous people of North America used to call. North America was always known as Turtle Island, and of course all the Western culture has no idea where or what Turtle Island is, but in that swift, in that those two words alone, everything is lost. And it's interesting to think that in the States there are numerous languages recorded and in extant that the people no longer exist. The language is left behind because somebody had managed to get it written down before the people were diluted out of from where they came from and became something else. And some people don't even know their origins. So it's understandable you not knowing about the language in Greencastle and how that was over, it was the last remaining Irish speaking area in Ulster, and perhaps in the Midlands, the whole of the Midlands, really, if there was further research done. I want to just bring you back to something for our podcast listeners. Can you explain what nGael is?
So ConyGlen is the Gaelic League, and they were set up in the late 1800s, if I'm saying that right. I think it was around the time that the GA was set up, and I suppose there was a big movement at the time. This was a more nationalist movement at the time, and bringing about Gaelic ideals and that kind of thing. So they were founded at the time, focused mainly on Irish. And the first president of Ireland was their first president, Douglas Hyde. So it was all kind of interconnected.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thanks for clarifying that. You now work for Glór nGael, and for our podcast listeners again, what is Glór nGael, and what kind of projects or initiatives do you find most rewarding in your role?
So it's Glór nGael, so the voice of the Gael. You're okay, the voice of the Gael. It's a very common mistake. But so it's a 32 county organisation. We cover the entire island, and I cover the northwest, and I've worked with different departments in it. At the minute, I work with the family department, so I work with Irish speaking families. So as you can imagine, we work outside of the Gaeltacht. We don't work in the Gaeltacht, but the Irish speaking families are not, all living beside each other, in a clachan or in a wee village. They're all spread all over the place. So my job is to provide activities, opportunities for them to come together, to use their Irish and to have fun through Irish, because it's a big effort in this day and age in a monolingual English society to bring your child up through Irish, because there's an extra effort upon yourself in terms of resources, in terms of meeting somebody that speaks Irish. So our role is to give them an easy chance to meet up and really to have fun, so that their kids see that it's absolutely normal to speak Irish, that it's absolutely normal for other mummies and daddies to speak Irish, and that they're not some strange being. And it's been the joy of my life, I have to say, to meet these families. We do a week-long holiday in Kerry in the Dingle Peninsula, and honestly, it's some of the best weeks I've had, just meeting these people from all over Ireland, from all over the world. Actually, we've had people that live in America, we've had people that live elsewhere, and that are doing it maybe with German as the other language in their family, with other languages in the house, not just everybody's so different and comes from such different backgrounds, and it's lovely. I think for me, because I always feel like I lost out in that connection, and I wish I was born maybe 50 years before, 100 years before, to meet those people living in Greencastle that were able to just speak Irish as normal, and it was never an effort. That's when we're there in that week in Kerry. It's just so easy. Everybody speaks Irish. Nobody has to question, does somebody speak Irish? Because we all know we're on the one boat. And my wee girl came home, and we came home from Kerry that time. She's like, everybody in Kerry speaks Irish. Because no matter where we went, we were all as a group speaking Irish. No matter what shop we went in, the people always replied to us in Irish and made an effort. And I just thought it was such innocent eyes, to her. Everybody in Kerry speaks Irish. I was like, yeah, of course they do. Yeah, soon she'll find out. But for as long as we can, we'll let that innocence shine through. Like, I just think it would be amazing if we had had that same opportunity in Greencastle. So it's lovely.
Well, you're perhaps recreating it, and it may become that opportunity for generations unborn in Greencastle. You never know. So beyond your formal role, how do you think the Irish language shapes your everyday life with your family, your neighbours, or indeed in your wider community?
Well, the wider community. So people probably know me in Greencastle as like the Irish speaker. Do you know, like they
Uh-huh.
always come to me with things, and I love that. You know, I've had people come to me when they've had babies and they want to make sure they spell the child's name right, that they have the spelling right, that they have the fada in the right place, that it's pronounced the right way. And I love that because, you know, it's really important to me that people actually do go about it the right way too, because there's so many wrong spellings and stuff out there too.
Uh-huh.
So it's nice to actually pay respect to the language and do it correctly. So I suppose people know me as that in Greencastle anyway, and then through the summer schemes and the youth clubs, that's how I meet most people, because I live in Oma at the minute, so I don't actually know all the people who live there, because there's so many, you know, people who've moved in and all, so they see me with that connection. But like in terms of my life, I speak Irish every day. Majority of my days spent through Irish. I speak Irish to my kids, my husband. One of my sisters is fluent in Irish. One of my best friends is fluent in Irish. So it's a massive part of my life, and it's probably like a wee underword. Like other people be like, "How do you spend your whole day speaking Irish?" But like I do, because that's normality to me. I lived in the Basque Country for a year, and they had a campaign at one stage, Euskaraz Nisi BC Naidut, I think. And basically it's I want to live my life through Basque. And that's like the rights that they were there, and every single aspect of their life to be able to live it through the Basque language. And there's one in Irish Seal Tree Gaelic to them. And really that's what how I feel like I should be able to and want to be able to have all facets of my life through the Irish language. So that's something I try, but it's kind of like most people wouldn't know if they meet me. But people always hear me when walking around Duns. People always stop and be like, "It's lovely to hear you speaking Irish," and you know, that's lovely. It's lovely for me and lovely for them, because I suppose people are surprised that somebody would be speaking Irish completely, and more so when they hear the kids speaking back to me, because it's probably a novelty to see them. But I think anybody that comes in contact with me probably gets some sort of a flavour of the language. I'm always happy.
So it's as natural as it should be. Natural as breathing. It's just who you be. Coming back to really this podcast, how do you imagine the presence of a large mining operation might change the cultural fabric and the language of the community?
Well, I suppose the biggest thing for me is like with the Irish language and stuff and the cultural stuff we're doing, it's revitalization that we're doing. You know, we're trying to bring the information out, we're trying to make people aware. But to do that, you have to bring people together. And to bring people together, whenever you have this massive tension in the community, when you have people, you know, against each other, when you have people who have certain views or feel like, oh, you're one side, and I obviously have been very vocal, you know, that annoys me, that people would think, well, I can't take part in things, or I don't want to do that because Sinead's doing that, and Sinead is organising this Irish language thing. You know, that for me, Irish is so important, and I've spent so many years trying to just bring it to the people in some ways, and bring it to the children, and get people together, whether it's been even through cultural things like doing the St. Bridget's Day crosses, get-togethers where we have everybody come through. And I feel like in terms of Gaelic society, being in community, gathering together, sharing things for free with no cost, was so important. And I always try to do that, you know, as well. It's not just about the Irish language thing, it's about those things that make us, I suppose, a Gaelic and culture. And I always find now, like, I'll be questioning myself, well, how should I put this out? Or will people think, well, she's involved with Dalradian, or she's involved, you know, against Dalradian, and I have a different opinion to her. Or like, if we wanted to do things, like, I think the Green Road is such a great resource. If I want to do something up there, I'm like, oh, will that put people off coming? Do you know? Or if I'm like, I spend a lot of time talking about, we did it the summer scheme there. Was it last year? We went up to Dunrua and out to the Stone, and we talk all about, you know, like getting back to nature and stuff. And I would talk a lot about, you know, what we should be appreciating in our area. And sometimes I think people are probably like, oh, she's pushing an agenda, but like, that's just, I believe in those things, and I think they're all part and parcel of each other. But because like that would never have been a question before Dalradian came, but now it's like this thing that I always have to think about. And I just think it's, I don't know, it's something that, I don't know, just something extra that pushes against something that should be so natural and easy to organise a community event.
That's interesting. It's an angle I hadn't already seen. Really, what you're talking about is in the past would have been Mhearnóg, where people come together to do stuff without charging. What I call Mhearnóg, I don't know what you call it. My Irish is different to yours. The pronunciation is different. So correct me, please.
No, Mhearnóg's right. Yes,
That's
Mhearnóg.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a great word and such a great concept of
Yeah, it
everybody
is.
coming
Yeah.
together.
And so it's sort of putting a question mark over in your head about bringing people together because of the threat of this hanging over the whole cross community and in relation to Dalradian and anti-Dalradian or pro-mining, anti-mining. It's sort of so it's not helping you in what it is that you're up to grow the language and grow
Yeah,
people's.
it hasn't stopped me in any way, but it's always kind of something I'm aware of. And I would hate I just hate the idea of somebody thinking, well, I'm not going there because she's for something. I would
Uh-huh.
hate the idea of somebody missing out because, you know, like it's so hard actually, especially at Greencastle. So nobody's bringing services to Greencastle to share the language. You know, the council isn't going to bring stuff out. The
Uh-huh.
council isn't actively promoting our culture and heritage. It's local people that do that. And I just
That's
hate
right.
the idea that it, you know, that something like that, if they'd never been about, it would never be an issue, you know.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Just a bit sad, but
Sinead, alongside your work around culture and language, you've shown extraordinary courage as an earth protector in the whole campaign. Can you take us back to that moment at the PDAC conference in Toronto 2018? And for podcast listeners, this is a big mining conference that's held in Canada once a year. And I believe you spoke to the Minister, Sean Kine, the Minister for Natural Resources, Community Affairs and Digital Development in the Republic at that time, who had given a keynote address on Ireland Open for Business. And he's also a fellow Gaeilgeoir. What happened and what gave you the courage to stand up and speak?
oh God, I don't know. Like looking back, sometimes I think it's mad. Me and Emmett went to Canada, and we were kind of just asked to go. You know, it was a different time in my life. I think like I couldn't go now. It was a couple of months before I was getting married, and we were asked to go. I think we were only asked about a week before it. Would we want to go? Okay, right. What are we going to do? We don't really know. Here's the things. This is what's on. Here's the details. You're registered for this event. This is what's going. So we had no plan going in. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no plan to actually stand up and give out at all. Like we actually hadn't planned that. And the night before, me and Emma were like, what are we going to do? Like, what is this plan? So we were kind of thinking, okay, well, if there's an opportunity, we'll do something. But it's not that we had actively, explicitly set out, this is what we're going to do. And then we went into, this was in Toronto, we went in and we went around, I think on the first day, it was you could go around all the stalls and see. So we pretended we were investors and we were trying to find out as much information so that when we went to the Ireland Open for Business day that we had the kind of information gathered. Obviously we knew about Dalradian behind the scenes as well, but to try and get as much out of the event, you know, to bring back to everybody as well for SOS. And so we went to the Ireland Open for Business dressed very like, you know, corporately, and probably nobody passed no remarks on us. Here's these two white people walking in that stand out, you know, because it was a very, I have to say, it was a very male dominated white event, you know, and the only people that were of color were a few girls dressed in carnival gear, you know, showing Brazil was open for business, which I still think is horrendous that that's the image they were portraying. But when we went into it, we sat through the talks. And I suppose we wanted to get as much out of it as well, not just, you know, if we complained at the very start, we would have been put out. So we kind of bided our time and we got as many notes and stuff as we could. And then the very last thing was Sean Kine was getting up to do the minister's address at the end. And before he finished, so during the thing, I was like, well, we have to do something. We can't not do this. I was getting more angrier talk by talk. One of the first people talking was Marie Cowan from GSNI talking about the Talis project and basically how they were doing that to bring these people to us, you know. And it was just very much like one mining company talked about social license and how you had to work to get that. And I was just getting more sicker and more angrier by the minute there, how they were all working with each other to try and get things through, you know. So I read out these notes and I was like, I was writing it out anyway, whether I was going to say it or not, I wasn't sure. I wrote it out and I was getting angry and I was like, I can't leave today and not say something. And I was like, I have to. And I just stood up and read out the thing and I was trembling and my lip was quivering, but I had to say it. And then I knew Sean Kine was Gaeilgeoir and it was really important to me to speak as Gaeilge because I think because of who we are, because of where we're from in Greencastle, that's such an important thing. And Martin O'Kane had always said that Irish language should be right front and centre. He was like a really important man. I'm not sure if you know who he is. He's a really important speaker and advocate for Gaeltacht rights in Gaeltacht. And he had always said how Irish language should be front and centre. And I'm proud to say with SOS and with the campaign, it always has been. So I've made sure to have Irish as part of it. So I finished it off as Gaeilge. And I actually thought that was important for me because that is one as a Gaeilgeoir, but also because he was a Gaeilgeoir. So it was nearly like a conversation between me and him because many in the room were Gaeilgeoir, you know, so he nearly picked up and listened more, you know, because it's, you know, a unique thing, I suppose. You're in Toronto and somebody's campaigning and speaking Irishy. So I feel like that helped.
Your fellow Earth Protector who travelled with you to the event, Emmett McAleer, and who's already been on this podcast, challenged the CEO of Dalradian, Patrick Anderson, who subsequently left the stage, refusing to answer any more questions. Long story short, following your visit to PDAC, Dalradian's shares plummeted. They called an extraordinary general meeting in August 2018 and sold the majority of shares to Orion Mine Finance. That moment showed how local voices can echo on the global stage. What do you think it says about the power of ordinary communities to stand up against multinationals?
Well, I think it shows that you have a voice and you can make change, you know, and I think they would tell us that those companies and any sort of a colonizer, and it is what they're doing, it is colonization that they're doing, they try and undermine the people that they're coming into. They try and make out that we're not worth value, you know, they try and make you feel like you have nothing to contribute. And what would you know, by calling us welly wearing farmers, you know, but little did they know that those welly wearing farmers and those farmers' daughters and sons are just as smart, just as strong, and have way more conviction than they do because they can come in with whatever they believe because they're viewing the world as, you know, I suppose the idea of what can we gain from it, whereas us as the locals who know every inch of the land are looking at us for, you know, are looking at it of, you know, what we can enjoy, what we can share, you know, as a community. So I think they just underestimated what they were doing, and they try and teach you that, you know, one person can't make a difference. And that was a big thing at the start of the campaign, was people saying, oh, don't be standing up against them, they're going to win anyway. And I feel like we have shown with every small action, you know, there's a reaction in everything we did. And I mind coming home from PDAC and the welcome we got, we were absolutely exhausted. We'd had a layover in Iceland, I think, and we were exhausted. We were taking up the road, and Cormac was like, I think it was Cormac took us up the road, was like, oh, you know, we're going out to the GPO. And me and I were like, oh, Jesus. Well, I mean, the absolute boost that we got from being there, and everybody was so happy and, like, you know, celebrating what we've done. And we realized then the impact and the importance of what we did. And I think then that encouraged other people. And like every, you know, I've read so many things about whether it's to do with the Irish language or any kind of a thing you're standing up for your rights, like you inspire so many other people, you know, one wee action does that. And even like when we were going to PDAC, there was really bad snow at the time and the buses weren't going and we didn't have anybody to take us down, and one man contacted us, a local man, I'll not say his name, but he knows who he is, and he took us to Dublin that day. And, you know, there's so many, the more wee things that we've done, and not just me, I mean everybody, somebody will come out and say, oh, well, I do support you. And maybe don't want to come out and stand up and be, you know, front of any marches or pickets or anything like that. But they let you know, and that all that keeps everybody going. We keep them going, they keep us going, you know. So anybody who's out there, like a part of any campaign, I think they can all take inspiration from each other, just like we took inspiration from Shell to Sea, you know, that's sharing. I know you've had some great people on about the Gather and all that, and I just think there's so much there to be learned from each other.
It's an interesting point that you brought up about convictions and values, and how what we value is completely different. They're obviously value the dollar, and that's everything they do, they have to get paid to do it, whereas we work from the heart. and no amount of money could pay us to do what we do day after day, week after week, year after year. And when you work from the heart, yes, it is an effort, but it doesn't feel like a job. It's just what we do, and that's where the two layers will never meet.
Yeah, 100%.
For you personally, what did that experience teach you about courage and solidarity and the impact of speaking out?
Probably taught me that you can, like, when you are courageous and you do stand up for something you believe in, whether you're scared or whether you're like, oh God, will I say this? What will people think? That when you do something for the right reasons and for what you believe in and something that feels so right, that it's not wrong. I like as in I made those notes and I was just like they just I knew they were right because everything they were saying, I was like, that's absolute lies, and they're
Yeah.
trying to make out with this social license and all. And it was so important for us to share that, no, what they're telling you is absolutely one-sided, and it's so important that we get our voice out and our side out. And I'm so glad now that I had the courage to do it because it wasn't easy. But then since then, everything we've done, you get more courage and
Uh-huh.
you get inspired. And as I said, when I come back, and the solidarity we were shown by people here, and it keeps you going, and it kept me going, I suppose. And sometimes I look back now that's 6 years ago. I can't imagine, as I said, doing that now. But I'm so glad I did. But the things I would do now are different because I have a different perspective in life. So
That's right.
all these things, teach you something as you go along.
Aye, and then they arrive in their own time when we're ready for it.
Yeah.
Let's turn now to something a bit more personal. Your hopes and fears for your own children and for the next generation. As a young mother, what future do you dream for your children in where you will be living in the future up in Greencastle, perhaps?
Oh, well, I hope that they have, I suppose, the kind of idyllic childhood that I had. They won't get quite the same glimpse into the past because the world is so changed and those old people and those old characters have gone. But I hope that by talking about them, sharing those stories, that they will appreciate those things. And I mean, those people give me an appreciation of, how hard some people have to work to live and to survive, and how they were dependent on water and clean water, and I hope that those values will be instilled in my kids, and I really hope that they are able to live in a safe and clean area, and that my parents didn't have to worry about Dalradian or anything like that whenever I was growing up. So like where we're actually building our house is very close to the mine, and I suppose it's something that's always in the back of your head now. And
Yeah.
I hope that everything that we do is working towards making sure that they never have to worry about in their future. They don't have to spend 10 years doing what we've had to do to keep them out.
And what do you hope for around the Irish language and culture and in their lives?
Well, I feel like, I mean, they've had such a different opportunity than I had. Like when you look back on the experience of the Irish language in Greencastle, and I know, but I know sometimes I talk about that all the time, about Greencastle and the Irish language, but like it's so important to highlight, because when you go back to actually how much English was pushed on this island, and it started in 1169 and it pushed and pushed, and then for many years it was kept around the Pale where the English was, and then further on down that in like the 1500s, then when it was kind of, I suppose they succeeded in moving it. There was more English language come down around the southern part of Ireland, but the northern chieftains kept it at bay, I suppose. But then we all know what happened with the Battle of Kinsale and the flight of the Arrows. And I mean, they said at the time that Hugh O'Neill trained his side soldiers with blackthorn sticks and ConyGlen. They went through the Sperrins in the flight of the Neils, and then obviously plantation of Ulster all came through. There was more English pushed, more people came taking land, pushed in, and then that was around the 1600s. Then you go into the 1800s, and they're saying the British Parliament, oh, you wild barbarous mountains of Monterlony, talking about us as if we're some wild weird beings, because the Irish language was still the living, breathing, everyday language. That's hundreds and hundreds of years, where other parts of Ireland had lost that, and Irish is a key like I'm not, for anybody's out there it's like, well, learn Irish, do it, because it opens up so much when you go out anywhere and you see place names or signposts. It actually opens up, you have a different view of the world because you're looking at it through a whole different perspective and understanding of what's around you. So that was still going on in Greencastle, and it wasn't until, you know, then we went through, it was penal laws. Greencastle still had loads and loads of Irish speakers, 1800s right into the 1900s, when like the majority of Ireland, apart from the very west coast, had moved to English. Irish was still strong. It was still a monolingual society right through the 1800s, right into the early 1900s. Like 1911, as I said, they had brought a summer school, and they only brought those summer schools to like Gaeltacht region. So it was a massive thing to be seen, to be so strong, to still have that. So I don't want to undersell that what we lost and what we fought for. And I suppose I don't understand because I'm probably always talking about, but it's such a massive thing, because I feel like the spirit that we have now is because of that, because we were so connected for so long to our language, to our land. That was never broken. That I suppose that the thing that the British were trying to do was to break the spirit, to break the link to the language, break that connection. Yeah. But that didn't happen. Now it eventually did happen. So when I look back in my own, in the very short, that 100 years now, so back then for so many families, like my granny said, she lived with us. She never spoke a word of Irish, but everybody who lived in her house spoke Irish. Her mommy and her daddy and her granny. Her granny was a monolingual Irish speaker. Her mommy and daddy were bilingual, and then they refused to speak English. And that's what happened. It was a turn of a generation, and then and it was all through at that stage more shame, more push towards the English. And it had survived so long and kept it so long. And then it changed, and then obviously I had to go through and learn Irish. My mummy never got a chance to learn any word of Irish in school. So then I look at my kids now and I'm like, to me, I suppose my aim to speak Irish then was to reach the unbroken chain, to reconnect it. And I feel like I've done that now with them. And I feel like they are for me, they're an inspiration, because they're going to grow up speaking Irish, and they're not going to have any of that shame, any of that hindrance, any of that, they're just going to be Irish speakers. They're not going to have gone through anything to get that. And I will make them so aware of everything that everybody else had to suffer to get there. Like there's a poem by John Montague when he talks about the child who goes home, it goes to school in English, it goes to an English school, and at schools all that time across the island, they're all speaking English, and it goes to school and have to speak English. But when they go home to the hearth side, that change where the parents were speaking Irish, and how that disconnection where they couldn't even communicate. And I think now that journey, like, and that everybody in Greencastle that is from that area, or from Ballinascreen, anywhere around the Sperrins, there, and it happened everywhere else at a much earlier space, but in Greencastle, like that's so close, and that you fight for what you've lost, and you fight for what you want to keep going. And we might have lost the language, but we're still fighting to protect everything else. But I look now and I see my kids and what, like, they're just going to be such confident confident speakers. There was a story about one of the Irish speakers, Jane McRury, and whenever somebody came to record her, like a really important historian, linguistic, went to record her, and one of her sisters was shouting, "There's no Irish here, there's no Irish here, be away with you, there's no Irish here." She was so ashamed that people would think there's Irish speakers. And I think now, like, my kids are going out as proud bilinguals in a world where the majority actually are bilingual or multilingual, where people like Kneecap, do whatever you think of them, they have broke the mold. Movies like in Calling Cuan, like the what you said about growing up in Dublin and your view and not seeing it as a living, breathing language, they live and breathe it every single day. There's nobody can say they don't live in a Gaeltacht. Our house is a Gaeltacht, so Gaeltacht Winterlinny, when I move back to Alia, at Gaeltacht Winterlinny will be re-established there, and so I have absolute hopes for them to go and spread the Gaelic gospel, but to do it in a way where they have no fear or hindrance or embarrassment, just to be proud of who they are and where they come from.
Oh, that is so great. It's so inspirational, and I will be watching you. Sinead, I believe that you have been known to write a little bit of poetry, and I just wonder, would you have a poem for us here this afternoon?
Oh, well, I don't write any poetry myself now, but I do appreciate it. But I had been kind of looking up at some things. I thought you might ask me a poem, but one of the ones that I thought I would pick, and just because I am, and it's been so important to me for so long, and I've talked about for so long moving back to Greencastle, and as I said, like, I work very much from the heart, and I feel from the heart, and somebody in my family recently called me a bit of a hippie, and they thought it was an insult, but I don't think it's an insult, because that's just who I am. And so this is Fuishu Ayotsa, Le Marchin Oduran. You may have studied it in school.
Oh, yes.
It talks about basically Martin O'Dearn going back to the Aran Islands, and that was his home. I suppose he'd lived away, and that's where he went to get Fuishu, so peace, where he goes to find peace. And I swear, every time, either when I lived in Derry and I used to drive over Sperrin and down into Dorval and down towards ConyGlen that way, or when I come from Oma and I drive down past the field up over, and you see Saul and Dart, and you come down in there, and there's just a Fuishu. That's the Fuishu that I get when I come home. And yeah, so I'm very much looking forward to getting that Fuishu every day, rather than spending the days driving out to Greencastle and coming back to Oma. But this is Fuishu Ayotsa, Le Martino Durin. Fuishu Ayotsa, Shal Bug Gurridge, a Mask Mogini, or Ilan Mara, Ag Shul Cush Claddy, Maji Nis Tranona, Oluan Gasahern, Here a Gabala. Fuishu Ayotsa, Shal Bug Gurridge, a Mask Mogini, O Chra Cree, O Wurch Agna, O Ugnis Gurk, O Hench Gontak, Here a Gabala. Sinead.
Oh, that's wonderful, Sinead. It's lovely to hear the music and the rhythm and the beat of living language. Thank you. As we wrap up, I always like to ask two things. First, is there someone you think I should invite onto this podcast? Someone whose voice needs to be heard?
I did hear you ask this in the other podcast, and I was like, I know you're going to ask me this. So I think it'd be lovely to hear. I know we've heard them when people from the Shell to Sea campaign used to come up. I know that inspired me a lot, and I think that was the first campaign. I was in Galway at the time, and I remember hearing about it, and it was the first camp where I suppose other welly wearing farmers that Dalradian would like to play down for us, but it was those welly wearing farmers, you know, that stood up, and that while they didn't, people would say they didn't succeed, but what they did succeed in is making that whole entire project much safer for absolutely everybody in the area, whether it was people who were pro or against, you know, and everybody on this island should be like very thankful to them for the effort they put in. I mean, going to prison, everything. They're really inspiring people. And again, they have that connection, the Irish language collection out there. They're in the Gaeltacht as well.
That's a fabulous idea, and I hadn't actually thought about it, because obviously I have a list of people who I'd like to, and that's a great suggestion. So I look forward to having them on here, and I will mention that it was you that proposed that they should come on. And my second question, when you look ahead for your family and your community and your language, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? Well, my kids give me hope, because they are just wee amazing Gaeilgeoirí who just speak it and live, breathe the language every day. In terms of, I suppose, the community, I would love to be able to, we've got a new development now at the GA club, and we're having meetings at the minute to bring the cultural language kind of element into it, and that gives me hope to have that and to do more of what we've been doing for the past I suppose 10-15 years from we set up the last summer school, and to bring more of it and to get more people to learn about our heritage and culture, and the fact that there is finally now a Sperrins partnership for the first time in I don't know how long since the AOMB was set up, and they seem to be doing great things. There's a new cultural thing set up by the council there. I can't remember the name of it, but it's some sort of a aspect anyway, focusing on enhancing and celebrating the heritage and culture that we have. So all those things, I feel like it take a long time for all those things to become important. I feel like COVID actually helped people realize what's actually important, as opposed to what capitalism and all these big businesses tell us what's important. Like, people actually went back to their roots and realized, you know, what is important is where we are and who we are, and these things that we have for free that we can enjoy. And yeah, I'd just love to have more of that, people being in community, celebrating all the things that make us a bit special up in Mhearnóg, up in Greencastle. And there was a thing the other day, there's a massive march on in Dublin. I'm not sure when the podcast will go out. It may be past the time the podcast goes out, but seeing a post about it, and one of the people wrote, I long for the day when Irish speakers will be just that, speakers of a beautiful language, not lifelong activists. So for me, I would repeat the same for Irish, obviously, but even just say I would love for the day when people of the Sperrins will be just that, people who live in the Sperrins are able to enjoy it and not lifelong activists. I hope that everybody's involved in the Save Our Sperrins campaign is able to relax very soon, that we've been able to put a line under it, that it's stopped, that the legislation is listened to that is already there, that should never have brought it to this place, all those things that make sense. So I would just love to be able to go back to being a lovely little community who get on with what we do in our own little quiet way, not worrying about what type of tension is out there, and just enjoying being so lucky to have grown up and live in such a lovely place.
And I second that. Sinéad ní Mhearnóg, thank you for the work that you do, firstly within your family, and closing that link where they will be once again Irish spoken, the length and breadth of your family and generations going forward. Thank you for the work that you do in Glór nGael. I've got that wrong.
nGael.
Thank you for the cultural work that you do and language in around your community in Greencastle. And here's to a Gaeltacht in Monterlony in the future. It's been a pleasure to have you on here, and I wish you every success, and you are absolutely inspirational. Keep on keeping on. Thank you to Sinéad ní Mhearnóg for joining me today and for sharing so openly her love of language, her community, and her courage. Her story reminds us that culture and identity are not luxuries. They are the threads that hold us together, and that even in the face of powerful corporations, the voice of one community can be heard right across the world. For the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the soil we grow from, together we hold the line.